The Bunch Recycler module, or BRM, accepts and validates deposited bunches of notes. The notes are either stored or recycled for dispensing. This video will overview the procedures for removal and replacement of the Field Replaceable Units, or FRUs, that comprise the BRM. This video assumes that you are generally familiar with the modules that make up the BRM and their functions. This information is presented in the NCR Bunch Recycler module, video number 1, BRM Overview, and video number 2, Theory of Operation. The FRUs on the BRM are the shutter, pocket, bill validator, bridge transport, escrow, upper control board, intermediate transport, lower horizontal transport, vertical transport, lower control board. Instructions for removing and replacing each FRU are located in the BRM service manual. While no adjustments are required after FRU replacement, sensors may need to be recalibrated. When sensor calibration is required, it will be called out in this video. Throughout these procedures, left and right-hand sides are defined as viewed from the front of the device, not the ATM. The shutter and pocket are at the front of the BRM. Remember to always use a magnetic screwdriver to avoid dropping screws. Any screw dropped into the BRM must be retrieved to avoid damaging the machine. On front access machines, begin shutter removal by pushing the shutter pin back. Slide the shutter open. Remove the shutter mounting screws. There's one on each side. Tilt the shutter forward before loosening the screws in the keyhole slots on the shutter cover brackets. There are 2 screws on each side. Slide the shutter cover to the right and lift it off the shutter. Disconnect the MEI cable and the barcode reader harness if the BRM is equipped with one. Release the cable clip and remove the shutter cable and power from the shutter control board. Remove the 2 retaining screws at the front of the shutter. There's 1 screw on each side. Cut the cable tie if needed. The shutter can now be removed. The shutter installation process is basically the reverse of removal. When installing the shutter cover, be careful to properly route the MEI cable to avoid snagging it. On rear access machines, begin shutter removal by lifting the fascia up and locking it. Remove the shutter cover screws. Remove the cover. Unlock the shutter assembly latch on each side. After disconnecting the white signal and power connector, the shutter assembly can be removed. When replacing the shutter assembly, ensure that it is properly positioned on the frame. Slide it into the machine and connect the white signal and power connector. Push the assembly firmly into the machine to properly engage the latches. Pocket removal begins with the shutter removed. Remove the 2 screws securing the harness cover on the right side of the pocket. Remove the cover. Disconnect the 7 pocket harnesses from the control board. Disconnect the inline connector as well. Open the front of the upper module, which covers the pocket and the upper exception bin transport. Remove the 2 pocket retaining screws on the right side of the BRM. It may be necessary to remove the harness bracket if access to the screws is blocked by the harnesses. Remove the 2 pocket retaining screws on the left side of the BRM. Open the exception bin transport. The pocket can now be tilted forward and lifted out of the BRM. When installing the pocket, Rest it on the lower bar and tilt it back into position. Closing the exception bin transport will hold the pocket in place while it is reconnected and secured. Bill validator removal begins by removing the plastic board cover using the popper. Disconnect the IFS connector. Remove the USB clamp screw before disconnecting the USB cable. Remove the screw securing the grounding cable. Insert a screwdriver through the access window below the module tray. While turning the green wheel next to the bill validator, use the screwdriver to pry the belt off the gear. Repeat this procedure to remove the belt from the gear at the left side of the bill validator. Remove the 4 screws that secure the bill validator to the upper transport module tray. There are 2 screws on each side. The bill validator can now be lifted from the BRM. Be sure to thoroughly clean the tray under the bill validator. During installation, be sure to check that the transport moves freely by turning the bill validator wheel at least 3 turns before tightening the 4 securing screws. Begin bridge transport removal by taking out the 2 screws that secure the harness cover to the left of the transport. Remove the cover. Disconnect the 3 harnesses nearest the front of the BRM. Remove the 4 screws that secure the bridge transport to the frame. There are 2 screws on each side. Open the transport and remove the 2 screws that secure the bar. With the bar removed, the bridge transport can be lifted out of the frame. During installation, make sure that the gears of the bridge and escrow transports are correctly meshed. Before fully tightening the 4 retaining screws, turn the green wheel to check that the bridge transport moves freely. Once installation is complete, launch SysApp. Navigate to Set Device Configuration and run a Replaced Transport command. This will calibrate the transport sensors. Begin escrow removal by taking off the harness cover on the left side. The cover is secured by 2 screws. Disconnect the 4 escrow wiring harnesses. There are 2 connections at the top and 2 at the rear of the escrow. Remove the 4 screws that secure the escrow to the frame. There are 2 on top, 1 at the rear, and 1 on the left. Once the screws are removed, the escrow can be lifted from the BRM. The installation procedure is the reverse of removal. To access the upper control board, first remove the 5 screws that secure its cover. One of the screws also secures a ground wire. Remove the 2 nuts that secure the IGUS chain to the bracket. After making note of each location, disconnect all of the harnesses from the upper control board. Remove the 4 screws that secure the board. There are 3 along the top of the board and 1 in the lower right corner. The upper control board can now be removed. During installation, remember that the 3 long screws are located along the top of the board. Use the plastic lugs to position the board before aligning the screw holes. When securing the IGUS chain, make sure to use the correct screw hole on the bracket. The holes are labeled for both rear access and front access models. Begin intermediate transport removal by racking out the upper module. Disconnect the CNN1 connector. On the new model of the intermediate transport, there is a connector cover. After you have removed the cover, disconnect the CNN1 connector. 3 screws secure the intermediate transport to the security enclosure. After they are removed, the transport can be lifted out. Installation of the intermediate transport is the reverse of the removal. Remember to fit the hole at the transport with the mating pin at the safe. After replacement, the transport sensors must be calibrated. In the SysApp Set menu, run a Replaced Transport command for the intermediate transport to calibrate the sensors. To begin